7:30 on Tuesday, June 20th, 2023, and I'd like to call this a regular meeting of the Darien Board of Finance to order. First item on our agenda, as always, is public comment. We have two of our staff colleagues here, but there are no one in the actual public. Jen, did we receive any emails?
No, we did not.
Okay. So first item on our working agenda is item 1 is to discuss and take action on a request for a transfer of $25,577 to Youth Services Program expenses.
So the Youth Services Director couldn't be here, but she did share a little information with me. What she's requesting is about $17,000 from contingency, with about $8,000 coming from other accounts within her department. The overage in her program expenses is primarily due to camp expenses. A couple of things are going on there. They've had increased enrollment, which is good on the revenue side. We're actually $54,000 better than budget on the revenue side because of the increased enrollments. But on the expenditure side, on top of just additional costs for increased enrollments, the increase of destinations, performers, special events that she has, those have all gone up. And then she's also experienced a challenge with space. She normally uses Board of Ed facilities, and because they have so many projects going on, she's actually had to move the camp around a few times. So now they're all going to be at Hindley, but because of space concerns, she has to have one of the camps off-site, so she has more field trips this year because she's got about 40% less indoor space. So they were supposed to be at Tokenique, then there were issues with that space. Then they had looked at Royal. They were going to have more space than at Hindley, but then there were some other challenges with that, so now they settled on Hindley. The program is going to be as great as it always is, but they've just had to make some adjustments for the space.
Jen, I just had one question on this. I mean, it looks like you got the typo in the...
Yeah.
Okay. The amount for program expenses.
Yeah, it'll be $25,577.
This does not fall underneath Parks and Rec?
Correct.
So it's not part of like the special revenue fund and
Correct.
expenses that we appropriate. Have you ever thought about, is there a need to do that given the increased programming?
No, this historically hasn't seen that kind of volatility. Where we're seeing it right now is coming out of COVID. There was a significant drop during COVID. It's been coming back up, and Alicia's just done her best to project what those enrollments were going to be, but they're exceeding her projections for the current camp season.
Jen, my only question on this is contingency. It's a pretty large. Did we just back into that number? Like, how do we get that number?
Alicia looked at everything that she needs to spend between now and June 30th
Okay.
for the first couple of weeks of camp, and all of the programs that are going to be needed, and she came up with her total and found as much as she could, and then the difference was contingency.
Okay.
So this is all within the 2023 budget?
Correct.
That we're doing this, but will some of these programs be delivered into fiscal 2024?
Yeah, there are weeks of camp in 2024, but this only captures what's needed through June 30th.
Got it. So to Ralph's point, we didn't program in 17,000 in contingency. She transferred stuff out of other accounts to get to that.
Right.
Okay.
Right, she needs 25, found 8, needs 17 for contingency.
Right from my days, there's like 2 sessions, right, of camp,
I
right?
think there might be
Is there 3 now?
2-week sessions.
It used to be 3. It used to be 2 3-week sessions, or maybe they.
It's 6 weeks.
Yep.
Any other questions? I would just make a global statement that all aspects of the town in terms of programming, youth services, Parks and Rec, everything, I mean, we continue to see sort of off the charts demand for everything from guitar lessons to paddle sports to camps and so forth. And so I do think we should continue to, granted they're kind of shrunk down because of what's going on with HHR. And if you saw, they started the track on Friday morning at 10 o'clock. But we should just make sure that I think we're using what limited facilities we do have as much as possible and trying to think as forward thinking in terms of flexibility, how we can use all those things. So, I'll accept the motion to transfer the 25,577 to program expenses. Taylor moves. Rob seconds. All those in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Next item on the agenda is number 2, discuss and take action on the request to transfer $50,000 from the parking capital fund to the Norotan Heights Railroad Drainage Project.
Good evening. Ed Gentile, Director of Public Works. Have a transfer in front of you right now to cover the overages from our bids that came in. We did have a low bid. Just a little history on this. The Norotan train station parking lot, we had designed a drainage system to go in there to handle the runoff from the impervious surface from the station down to the depot. It's approximately 2.5 acres of runoff. It now goes directly into Heights Road. Attributes a lot of the additional runoff and flooding to that area and causes the rise. So what I had designed was to handle all that water on site, infiltrated into the ground. Any overflow would be dropped directly into the pipe that goes into the railroad tracks, never making its way to Heights Road anymore. So there were 3 projects this was one of them. Federal did their project, large detention system into their facility, and the Palmers actually put some drainage on their parking lot on Edgerton alongside to grab the water that actually made its way down. So this is the final project. We got some bids. We have a low bidder ready to go. So I needed additional $15,000. I did some. I put in some contingency, so I'm asking for a transfer out of the parking fund capital projects account for $15,000. Any money that I do not use will go back to that capital fund.
When would work start?
We're waiting for the money to be transferred and approved. Then I can sign an agreement, cut a purchase order, and work on a schedule. The gentleman, the business that has this, Grasso, is also our paving contractor and our sidewalk contractor. And as you just heard, I have some paving and sidewalk to do in that area also. So most likely I'd like to get it done this summer. I just don't think that's going to happen, but I am going to try. But if not, I will cordon off areas in that parking lot. We'll work our way down, not sacrificing parking on that side to impact too much. We'd still have the other side. If after September, I understand the train line that goes to New Cane will be opened up again. The parking will decrease. I'll have more spaces to use over that area. So I've got to take a look at that. We'll see what happens with the paving and the sidewalk first.
How many, if you had to, the area which you're going to be working in, if you had to equate that to the number of parking spots, how many might that?
Anywhere between 50 and 75. I tucked it closer to the road so that we would leave the parking along the fence and the tracks alone, and then I would cut areas out that they could work in. So we're going to be burying underground concrete galleries. They go down about 5-6 feet, and they can put those in sections and then backfill, open that section up again and move down.
And Jen, just to confirm, this isn't actual tax dollars. These are all sort of parking revenue that goes into the parking fund, and then we
transfer from the parking fund to the parking capital fund on a regular basis.
And, I know some of these projects, I know we lease this property from the state.
We have a lease with them, that's correct.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I know we're going to look into, maybe it's part of the summer project, but just making sure we had a good understanding to that lease, where does kind of maintenance stop and kind of capital begin?
I think our discussions with the DOT Rails folks, they also would like to have that discussion as we're seeing some major capital work being asked of us that I believe needs to be done by Metro and the DOT. So that discussion is being had. It's at least started off anyway.
Okay. I'll accept the motion to transfer $50,000 from the parking revenue fund to the parking capital projects fund. Jen, is that right?
No, it's all within the.
Is it already in the
It's all within
capital
the
fund?
parking capital fund.
Okay, so $50,000 from the capital projects fund within the parking
The
fund,
capital projects account.
capital projects account within the parking fund, I guess, to the drainage project. Dan moves. Dave seconds. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Next item on the agenda is discuss and take action on a request to transfer $9,000 for a parking enforcement vehicle purchase.
So the transfer you have in front of you, this one also out of the parking fund capital, is to purchase the new parking enforcement vehicle. We've been using the trade-ins from the police department, the SUVs, and we've been running into problems keeping it maintained and having to switch all the equipment over to all the different cars. And I spoke with Kate Bush about purchasing one out of the fund eventually, and last year we obtained the funds. The hardest part was obtaining a vehicle. So the $40,000 I thought would be plenty. The vehicles are higher priced now, they're hard to get, so we finally found one that we wanted. It came in at $46,000 and I only had 40 in the account. I'm asking for a transfer to cover the difference, plus any of the amenities that will add to it, which is any type of safety lighting, the decals on the sides and the back, the reflective decals, and so on. So I added a little bit more in there to cover it.
Any questions? Okay.
Are these- Well, yeah, I mean, what was the issue with the police vehicles, that the equipment had to come out, and then what new equipment had to go in?
Well, we keep moving the license plate reader from vehicle to vehicle to vehicle.
So it's installed on the.
It's
on
the computer's in the back and the system, the readers are on the front of the cars. We just kept having to do it. The transmissions on these SUVs for the police tend to get a lot of use from the police department and don't have a long life for the parking enforcement piece that we have out of the parking rangers.
And there are no other cars in service in town that are useful or easier to convert
I can continue what I'm doing now is probably my only option,
the police?
using their SUVs. I don't think that's efficient for what we're doing over there, and based on where these funds are coming from and what we're using to do enforcement with, and I'd like to do more, I think this vehicle is going to actually provide us more ability to do ticketing downtown. It's more visible, so I actually think this is probably a benefit than going back to the police cars every 2 years.
The equipment that reads the license plate, is that only on one of the enforcement vehicles or on both?
We only have one vehicle,
So
so we only have one set of equipment. And we're looking on upgrading that now in the near future also.
Okay. Again, this is going the same way from the capital projects account within the parking fund, so it's not tax dollars, but we're moving into the project. So if there are no other questions, I'll entertain a motion to move $9,000 from the capital projects account within the parking fund to the parking enforcement vehicle purchase account. Dave moves, Rob seconds. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thanks, Ed. Next item is to discuss and take action on a request to transfer $12,000 for the town hall small gym roof replacement.
So this transfer, we have a project for this small gym for the replacement for the roof. It's the only section of roof that wasn't replaced when they did the town hall and the Board of Ed section. I'm sorry, I can't tell you why I wasn't here while they did that, but it did last as long as it has now, an additional 9 years. So we're looking to do that. It has we had some leaking going on in the small gym and the storage areas. We did get a price. We put it out to bid. We had $90,000 that's ready for us to spend as of July of this year. Our bids came in at 96 plus. So I added about a 5% contingency in case we find some areas of the roof that either need to be shimmed or shaved. That's just pitching of the roof instead of just putting a membrane on top. So, and any coping that may need to be replaced up there. So added a 5% contingency on top of that. So I'm asking for a $12,000 transfer. I did put in the Board of Finance reserve, but that's up to you folks if you do approve it, where it would come
And this is not related to the town hall gymnasium upgrades project?
It is not, no.
But I think that was that a window project mainly?
It was, those upgrades are all windows.
Okay. So this would be coming out of the Board of Finance capital reserve, within the reserve fund for capital non-recurring expenditure. So our options are we have well in excess, I think, of $500,000, so we can either approve the 12,000 and kind of get it going now, right? Or the choice would be to send it to the RTM. We technically aren't in session, so my vote would be, as kind of recommended here, to take it out of our capital reserve. Great. So Dave makes a motion to transfer $12,000 from the Board of Finance capital reserve to an account for the town hall small gym roof replacement. Dave moves. Dan seconds. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thanks, Ed.
All right, thank you very much, folks. Have a good night.
Okay. Okay, so in terms of discussion items, things that we don't may not need to we may or may not need to take actions on. The first one is to discuss and take action, I guess, on the suspense list. Kathy's here to kind of run over the tax suspense list.
Okay, so each year I'm required to come before you with my suspense list and ask for your approval to have the suspense list basically written off the receivable of the town. So tonight I'm asking for the suspense for Grand List 2018 of the original $7.5 million and 21,229 motor vehicle, supplemental motor vehicle, and personal property accounts originally billed. There remains $20,767.89 and 138 accounts uncollected. This amount is considered uncollectible and therefore my request to be removed from the tax receivable on the town's books. Collection efforts on the suspended accounts will continue. As you see from information I provided you for this meeting, over $2,000 in previously suspended accounts was collected during the current fiscal year. I would also like to point out that the amount that I'm asking to suspend is less than comparable municipalities of Westport and Ridgefield. New Canaan did suspend less than I did, but if you look, her grand list for the motor vehicle and supplemental motor vehicle was from 2014, so it should be less. And I just did a quick, I know you asked some questions that I kind of want to address in addition. But the first thing is Westport is suspending Grand List 2020. They had a figure of just under 179,000. So I looked at what I have on my books for outstanding for Grand List 2020 at this point in time, and it's $40,275. So again, I'm below Westport as well. There are different methods that are used in order to determine what is suspended. Darien has always used a grand list year, so it's 3 years prior to the year that we are ending. Ridgefield does the same method. New Canaan is more picking and choosing specific accounts. Westport is suspending the prior grand list year, so we all do different things. Once an account is suspended, collection efforts continue for the full 15 years. The question was why are accounts deemed uncollectible? There's a variety of reasons. We have bankruptcies, we have people who have passed away, people move out of state and they don't, the tax bills can lag. They don't follow up and pay any outstanding bills once they move out of state. However, we do put a hold on their registration with DMV for the full 15-year period. So if during that time they decide to move back to Connecticut, and it doesn't have to be Darien, anywhere in Connecticut, they will have to pay their outstanding taxes to Darien in order for us to release the hold on the registration. So it's a very powerful tool that we have. We also file UCC liens on personal property assets, taxes that are outstanding. I know there was a question in terms of what items are subject to personal property tax, and their business assets, which would be, the main categories are furniture and fixtures, data processing equipment, leasehold improvements. And it would be based on the personal property declaration that's filed in the assessor's office every November. The question about what's the difference between a motor vehicle tax and a supplemental motor vehicle tax, it's all based on the registration date with DMV. So the motor vehicle tax bills come out in July, and they're based on active registrations according to DMV on October 1. So the July bills that are coming out in another 2 weeks are for active registrations on October 1 of 2022. Supplemental motor vehicle taxes are the bills that come out in January. Those are based on active registrations between October 2nd and July 31st. And both bills cover to the end date of the tax period covered is September 30. So the first year you get a car, if you register it between October 2nd and July 31st, you'll get a supplemental bill in January. Then the following year, July, you'll start getting on that annual July billing cycle. So that's the difference there. Do I farm out to collection agencies? Yes, I do. I usually give people a full year. Like in July, the tax bills, anyone that has a prior balance, the bills are noted that they have an outstanding balance. We apply to the oldest bill. So a lot of times I will get some of these prior year bills covered, and then we'll send them balance due for whatever, hasn't been paid. And then after that, like in August, I'll put the prior year bills on collection. We don't pay any kind of fee. Any fee the delinquent taxpayer picks up, so there's no cost to the town. I don't know if there's anything that I didn't answer. Do you have any questions?
I guess the other thing that I was interested in is you put a list of prior year suspense collections.
Right.
How does this, what, is there like a rough estimate of what percent of the amount that went into suspense? So if you collected in 2013, 14, $3,900, is that out of 5,000 or is that out of 25?
Okay, so I added, based on your question, if you look, I added the amount that was suspended that year, which is not going to be the same grand list year.
Okay.
All right, and I put the grand list year. So you can see in 13, 14, I collected $3,900 in previously suspended accounts.
Got it.
And that year, we suspended $28,681 from grand list 2009.
All right, so our collections seem to vary a lot. The suspended amounts
Yeah.
seem reasonably consistent. They
Yeah.
fluctuate some, but they're not by a whole lot.
No.
Cool.
And Kathy, following on Dave's question here, so it shows like 56% of what you collected was actually from the 2017 grand list year.
Right.
So I would say thank you, and that's impressive that
Yeah.
in 2023 we're still collecting and
Yeah.
doing the work to collect stuff from 2017 back to 2007. So
And sometimes it's someone moving back to the state that, we still have the hold on their registration. And, I take the files I get from the collection agency, and we look for anyone that has moved back to the state. Because DMV didn't start this whole program of putting holds on registrations till Grand List 2010. So we see someone that has older cars, we'll put the hold on. So they have to pay us. We try everything.
Sounds like it. And thank you for that.
Oh, no problem.
like the title here should be "You Can Run, but You Can't Hide."
You cannot.
There you go.
So Jen, in terms of the action we need to take, or any other questions for Kathy
Yeah.
or for Jen? Yes. For Jen, in terms of the action we take here to approve this,
Yeah, to approve suspending the list of 2018 for the 20,766.
so I'll accept the motion to approve the, as detailed in the memo here from Kathy, $20,767.89 worth of due taxes from the 2018 grand list. Rob moves, second. John seconds. All those in favor? statements.
Thank
I
you.
need to sign this.
Yes.
Very thorough.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Yep.
You're doing a great job. Appreciate it.
I'm at 99.69, by the way. I'm gonna get over
Who's counting? But who's
99.7.
counting?
I got my list.
99.7 is within reach.
Oh, absolutely.
You
I
got
was
your
hoping
li-
I'd
you
have
got
it
your
for
list?
tonight, but, oh yeah, I have my list.
She's checking it twice.
Thanks, guys.
Look out.
Careful where you park your car.
So the next item is to discuss and take action on a request for a special appropriation of $679,394 for a transfer to the reserve for capital non-recurring expenditures from the general fund.
Right, from the fund balance. This has been alluded to a few times throughout the year and also during our budget discussion. So just to refresh your memory, we get town aid road grant money from the state. We get roughly $340,000 a year. We have historically budgeted that as a revenue in the reserve for capital non-recurring and used it to support our paving program. We did that up through fiscal '23. In fiscal '22, as of course, during the audit, but also just as had already just closed out the books, we were contacted by the state who wanted to know specifically which projects we had used town aid road money on, and reminded us of some contractual obligations when we use state money on public works projects between $50,000 and $500,000. Those contracting requirements, one of the big ones is that a contractor is required to submit a set-aside plan indicating that a portion of the contract will be used for minority business enterprises. And that is very difficult to do in the paving world. Just the number of contractors that do paving, the types of contracts that are written, there's not much opportunity for that kind of set-aside for other business enterprises. So in 2022, we were able to, instead of having the revenue credited to RFCNRE, we credit it to the general fund because the town aid road grant does allow you to use it for many other types of expenditures. Snow plowing, tree trimming, general road maintenance, a lot of things that we do out of the general fund that wouldn't require us to meet that contracting requirement. At the time that we moved it, because of this new enforcement of that requirement, we already had the fiscal '23 budget set. So we had to do the same thing in '23. It was budgeted as a revenue in RFCNRE, but we had to credit it to the general fund. That's corrected in '24, we'll have no problem. But basically for 2 years, the general fund got revenue totaling this $679,000 that we had planned for RFCNRE. So we just need to move it back over to RFCNRE to make RFCNRE whole.
We're kind of unwinding the,
Exactly.
So this should technically, so long as we actually get what we assume we're going to get in town aid and road aid, we shouldn't have to make this again, right?
Right, because we have it now going into the general fund with the intention of it supporting those general fund activities like snow plowing, tree trimming, et cetera.
And why didn't we do it then? Maybe I missed something.
Because it wasn't, I don't know when the requirement was put in place, but it wasn't, they weren't requiring us to provide them with contractor information and that sort of thing. And when they started implementing these requirements, it's just either going to reduce or even eliminate anybody from bidding on our projects because it can be onerous for the contractor, or because it is onerous, they might increase the cost of paving. So we would rather use it for something that's not going to increase our costs.
So Jen, maybe just a technical question here. So the way that we have this, since this sort of covers 2 years-ish, right?
Mm-hmm.
This 679,000, is it currently part of the general fund unrestricted balance?
Half of it is. The fiscal, because we haven't closed out what we got in '23, but we
Okay.
did close out what we got in '22. So the roughly 340 that we got in fiscal '22, as part of the closeout of fiscal '22, became part of general fund balance. In the fiscal '23 piece of it is going to add to our surplus in fiscal '23, which will then become part of fund balance.
Got it, but so half of this is actually going to reduce the unassigned fund balance?
Yep, and the
And
other half will
is just
reduce
sort of
current year's
clearing out an
surplus.
IOU? of that in the
Yes,
correct- okay.
exactly.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Jim, really quick, the ICC, the grant from the state,
You're skipping ahead to the next item.
no, it was actually I thought it was part of the 697.
No, that's the rescission of the Crimmins Road.
Okay, I'll hold my question then. Thank you.
No looking ahead.
Speed reader, always.
Okay, so I'll accept a motion to transfer $679,394 from fund balance within the general fund to the closeout of funds in the reserve fund for capital non-recurring expenses. Taylor moves. John seconds. All those in favor? Unanimous. Next item is to appoint members to the ARPA Funds Steering Advisory Committee. I think the way that this has worked is that it's the chairman of the Board of Finance plus one.
The chairman or their designee plus one other Board of Finance member.
Okay. So,
That's modified from the prior.
No, we went back, that was the original language.
Oh, that was the
Yep.
original language, because okay.
So I think we were thinking about, I think Frank Huck was the chair's designee.
Got
The
it,
committee.
okay, that's right, all right.
You did something with this already, right?
Frank and I were on it, now that I
Yeah.
remember,
okay,
okay.
you were the Board of Finance member and Frank was the chair's designee.
Yep.
Got it, okay.
So in this case, I think given that this is going to be a relatively short, I think, reactivation, because I think we're trying to figure out what to do with surpluses, because everything needs to be allocated by the end of,
It needs to be obligated, we need to have.
so
contracts.
obligated by the end of 2024?
To clarify, right, it's not just that. We're removing a couple of public works items because the scale of those items is in excess of what we set aside. So I believe one of the things we'll be looking at is whether to remove that and replace it with other projects.
Right, and other
then-
projects that may not really be moving forward, that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we don't necessarily need to not use ARPA funds for a project. If it's over, we could use part ARPA funds and part
yes,
bond
yes,
proceeds, but yes.
yes, that's true.
So,
Yes.
so my recommendation is I was gonna serve on it, as a chair, and since Dan had spent a lot of time and has a lot of historical knowledge on this, and so I was gonna recommend that, that Dan be on there as well. But I do think, with that recommendation, I'll say, particularly given some of the projects that we're gonna fund out of there, some of which involve flooding and so forth, and that there are a number of other projects percolating around, I think it's gonna be incumbent on all of us to very much stay on top of all of those projects and sort of what we're doing here, because while the ARPA committee simply will make recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, right? They don't actually make the decision. It's gonna have a lot of effect in terms of how other projects are actually funded. So, I guess my recommendation would be for me to serve in the role as the chair and Dan. Do we need an actual vote on that?
It wouldn't hurt.
Okay, so is there a motion to, I guess, approve the chair's recommendation of myself and Dan on the committee?
So move.
John moves, I'll use Dave as second. All those in favor?
All those opposed?
You can't get out of it? Oh, you in favor?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's unanimous.
Thank you
Jen, can I
both.
ask you a quick question, just from a mechanic point of view? The ARPA funds are in, we're not commingling them with anything else, right? Are they in there? Or
They're in their own fund on the ledger.
Just
All
wondering.
100% of it?
Yep.
6.4 is in, okay.
Yep.
And when we distribute any money, because I know we have a little bit at this point, it's just coming out of that bank account. Okay.
It's not in a separate bank account. Cash is commingled, but it's separated on the ledger and tracked on the ledger.
But that cash is not in the general fund, is it?
It's in our pooled accounts, yeah.
Okay.
Because we're allowed to allocate interest earned on it to the general fund. We don't have to use the interest on ARPA. So we're pooling it and crediting the interest to the general fund.
But it's not included as unrestricted fund balance.
No, it is its
That-
own
that's what-
that was my-
fund. Yeah, in the audit,
that
it
was my
is,
only-
it is separate, it's not rolled up to
Okay.
the general
I
fund.
just couldn't remember from the audit balance sheet. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and it hasn't really been called out in the audit because we hadn't spent enough for it to really be a major
impact,
fund,
yeah.
but now we're getting to that point.
Perfect, thanks.
And the audit reports that's basically a separate fund.
Yeah.
So the next item is to discuss and take action on the rescission of a $27,700 transfer that we made for the purchase of 27 Crimmins Road back in 2022.
July of 2022. So at that time, our emergency management director, Mark McEwen, had come to you because the demolition costs, when he got the quote, were significantly more than what our original estimate had been. So at that time, you approved transferring $27,700 from capital reserve to the Crimmins Road purchase to have a full appropriation so that we could move forward with demolition. But there was this unknown of potentially getting $30,000 for the increased cost of compliance coverage grant. And at that time, the homeowner had signed off on assigning that grant to us. We just weren't sure how it was going to process through FEMA and all of that. So we did just recently, end of May, beginning of June, we actually received all of our final FEMA money. We did prior receive the $30,000 grant. Project is done, fully funded, fully expensed. And because we did get the $30,000 ICC grant, we can rescind the transfer that was planned because we're still within the same fiscal year. We didn't actually transfer the money yet, so we can just rescind it. We don't have to approve a transfer back.
So my question was gonna be, is that flood insurance out there?
It was related to flood insurance, something along those lines.
It was just the homeowner's flood insurance,
I think so, yeah.
Because I think they had
And they had to
agreed
sign
to
it
assign
over,
it back
yeah.
to us.
Yeah, okay.
Because we weren't sure at the time how much they were actually going to collect.
Right.
30 grand for flood insurance? Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know how that relates to premium versus claim amount, but we did get the 30,000.
Yeah, so this was going to be transferred from a project fund, right, back to the capital reserve?
We don't have to transfer it
We
back.
don't?
We're just gonna rescind what you approved because it's all within
So
the same fiscal year.
We vote to rescind.
Yep. And then it's like it never happened.
So it never left the capital reserve fund.
We do those interfund transfers at the very end of the year.
So we never moved it into a project account?
No. Budgetarily, it's there, but cash didn't move, no.
Okay. So I'll accept the motion to rescind our July 19th, 2022 transfer of $27,700 from the reserve fund to the purchase of 27 Crimmins Road. Taylor moves. Dave seconds. All those in favor? Unanimous. Financial report.
So when I put this together, we didn't have, Kathy hadn't had a chance yet to close out and for us to book the May taxes. So these are numbers through April on the property taxes, but we have since booked it, and I think it's about $200,000 that we took in May. So now we're about $350,000 positive on our, better than budget on our property taxes. And just, Kathy mentioned that she's at 99.69. In fiscal '22, our budgeted collection rate was 99.45, and her actual was 99.8. And in the current fiscal year, our budgeted collection rate is 99.47. As she said, she's at 99.69. And then for next year, we put in 99.48 is our assumed collection rate.
So is there anything material in terms of what the Board of Selectmen approved last night in terms of like the 3 different revaluations? Will that reduce this year's tax collections? Or will it show up as an expense?
It would, if we have to whatever we have to refund would reduce revenue.
Because it's like, it's basically 3 years. I think those settlements were for 3 years
Yeah.
back.
So that will reduce the revenue. Investment income, cranking along. And then the only other one that I wanted to point out is down on building permits. I have an updated number from them. We budgeted 57.5 for redevelopment, and we've taken in 89,330. And we're doing really well on basic, kind of our base permit numbers. We're only $121,000 to go to meet budget. So we're doing well on building permits as well. Town clerk is at 1.6, and we've been looking at that. It has definitely dropped off of prior years. I'm not sure if we'll hit the 1.8 this year, but we did bring it down in fiscal '24. Then on the expenditure side, education operations, I did double check with Rich today to see what he's projecting as a return from the Board of Ed. It's gonna be about $800,000 is his projection as of now. And 735 of that is excess cost related. So it's primarily excess cost that's gonna drive any surplus that they have.
735?
Yep.
And I think that's down a little bit from what we were assuming, but I think the Board of Ed had to use some of that for, if you guys saw the meeting, for the movement of swing sets from Oxbridge down to Hindley to kind of recycle those units, so.
Right. Everything else on the expenditure side is tracking as expected. We are gonna have a significant surplus in the police department because they had several vacancies for the majority of the year. I think they're either one vacancy or fully staffed at the moment, I can't remember. But we don't expect to have that same level of vacancy in the police department going forward. And then I did receive one question about page 2, line number 4, the transfers out to other funds. And some of this may have been answered on the town aid road special appropriation. But this is where we kind of accumulate and aggregate everything that's gonna go out to other funds from the general fund. So the $1,296,000, that's the adopted budget, was the planned contribution from the general fund to RFCNRE. And then the transfers and amendments are 2 items, $335,000 for the school security improvements, and $2,640,000 is what you appropriated from fund balance to fund the fiscal '24 capital. So then what you'll see next month is this will go up by that $679,000 that you, no, it won't, because we have to wait for the RTM to approve it. But at the end of the year, once they approve it, there'll be another $670,000 budgeted here. On the state revenues on page 4, I did receive a question just for clarification on the educational cost sharing. We're $297,000 better than budget because we received a prior year excess cost adjustment. The original number that we were expected to receive was $294, and we actually got just under $297 as a prior year adjustment. It's pretty common that we may have small adjustments, but this is pretty significant. This is more than we would normally have as an adjustment.
Is this, I think, the one where some of the schools became eligible
Yes.
institutions under the ECR program?
Yep. And so we didn't get the actual revenue in '22, so they make up for it the following year. On page 5, I do want to point out your contingency accounts as we come up to the end of the year. The general fund, we're at $205,000 now that you have approved the youth services transfer. Even though the budget as a whole is going to have a surplus, we may need to hit that contingency because departments can't necessarily cover within their own department. So we may have to dip into that, but there'll be significant surpluses elsewhere that will offset for the budget as a whole.
Jen, on the government revenues, just because the budget was just released not too long ago, I saw our ECS money was up by about 13,000, about 2.5%. Any material changes on what was actually in that budget versus what we were assuming for next year?
Nothing material, no.
Okay.
I think there was maybe a slight change on LoCIP. There was the educational cost sharing, but nothing was really significant or anything that we really need to address.
I guess when we get such little aid, it's hard to move the needle.
Yeah. The only other thing I want to point out on page 5 is your available BOF capital reserve is just under 500. It's at 491, and that does account for the town hall small gym roof and the rescission of the 27.7 for Crimmins Road.
Jen, on the BOF contingency, what's the telecom audit again? I'm ringing a bell.
That was where we looked at all of our phone lines, data lines, wireless devices, that sort of thing, and identified a lot of savings.
Found all the numbers that didn't actually exist, but we were paying for it.
Yeah, and the $10 a month hit on all of the
That was
listed
amazing.
numbers.
Yeah, that was the best idea I've ever had. Is that your idea?
Which on that 20,868, we paid 1 year of savings, so we should
Right.
see that.
Yeah.
Right, so in the
perpetually.
budget,
Yeah.
we have the reduced numbers in all the budget lines.
Yeah, was that a contingency fee? Wasn't it like we whatever they recover?
Yeah, it was based on what they
50,
identified and what
80,
savings
20.
we took. Because even if they identified it and we didn't take it, we didn't get billed for it.
Yeah,
We didn't
okay,
have to pay them for identifying.
thank you.
Page 7, the sewer fund is looking pretty good. We've collected just over 4 million to date. We've expended 3.3. We do have a budgeted $166,000 transfer from sewer operating to sewer capital, which we will book at the end of the year. So expenditures will go up another 166 for that, as well as for the June expenses. And then page 8, the parking fund. It's doing pretty well. We've taken in 729,000. We've spent 378. We still have June payroll and regular expenses. And in this one, we have a budgeted transfer of 146,000 that will be done at the end of the year. Part of the long ago agreement with the state is that we must transfer at least 20% of gross revenue from the operating fund to capital. So we budget 20%, but then we have to sometimes increase that transfer if our revenues exceeded what we had planned. But overall, this is doing well, and we did have to draw down the fund balance from this fund during COVID when nobody was using the trains. So our fund balance is actually, as of 6/30/22, was down to 493,000. So any surplus that we have in this fund will stay in this fund and start building up that fund balance again.
Jenna, is there any update on the lease that was going to be, that the town was looking at for both stations?
No, I haven't heard anything on that. I know it's been a lengthy discussion.
These are the leases that used to be for the 2 coffee shops?
I think one of them is either settled or close to settled, but I think there were some minor sticking points. Page 9, Recreation Program Fund. We've taken in about 1.3 million, spent about 989, but we wouldn't expect to see much more collected, but we will see expenditures go up just because, they have program seasons. So we get a big inflow of revenue, and then they have their expenses as they run the programs. But overall, I think we had planned about $250,000 as a surplus in that fund that would transfer back over to the general fund, and I think we'll be pretty close on that. Great Island Management Fund, that's our new fund that was set up for the operations side of Great Island. That was approved through a special appropriation about a year ago when we were first looking at buying the island, and expected the acquisition would move faster. Since the acquisition closed the beginning of May, we don't have any rental income in there yet, but you will see that coming in June. And this is a fund where the budget will just be able to roll to next year.
Then the expenditures of $17,500?
That was lawn equipment that was purchased at the time of the acquisition to maintain the property.
And that was that purchased from the seller?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, as part of the deal. Active bonded projects, those are all going well. We're spending down the notes and the last tranche that we had for Oxbridge. It's still kind of unknown. The bulk of the notes is HHR, so it's still kind of unknown how quickly that's going to get moving along. But we are seeing a pretty consistent stream of expenditures in all of those funds. The two the two on the right-hand column on page 10, the Holmes roof and skylight and the Hindley roof replacement, those projects are essentially done. We're waiting for state grant money. I don't think we've received the state grant money, so I don't know why it says life to date we received anything. We're waiting for the state to close out the projects and provide the grant money so that we know exactly what the excess bond proceeds are, because we did borrow more than we needed for the projects. And we will transfer those excess bond proceeds to another active Board of Ed project, either HHR, the track, something like that. So it'll reduce what we have to borrow on those other projects.
Great.
The rest of the projects are moving along pretty well. No surprises on them, kind of going along as expected.
What's the conversion to natural gas? I forget, like, how long that's.
Oh, that's been languishing. Part of it was COVID related and getting contractors out there to take a look and even quote the project. And then they finally got quotes and they were significantly higher than budgeted, because we have some funds in bond funds and some in RFCNRE. But they were able to scale back the project in a way that does still meet their needs, and they're getting ready to move forward with it. So we should start seeing some expenditure on that project. Page 15 is our tracking of Great Island. Altogether, between bonds and notes, we borrowed $91.7 million. And if you recall, you authorized borrowing about $6.5 million more than what our estimated acquisition needs were for site prep, access, making it safe and usable for the public to get out there. No amenities, nothing like that, but just making it so that it is accessible.
Has that committee been formed and announced?
Last-
I know a ton
Last
of-
I heard, they were still interviewing.
Still
They had like 45.
Because they had a lot of people.
They had like 45 people
Yeah,
put
okay.
their names in.
Yeah, they got a lot
that,
of
yeah,
applications.
so.
Okay.
I thought last night they, that was gonna be one of the items on the agenda, and I think they pushed that for one more week or whatever. Because I think they're going on 4.5 hours, but I think they've interviewed everyone. Their last batch was, I think, yesterday before the meeting.
So the expenses that you see here, what we've incurred in the last month is the trailing legal bills. We've paid for legal activity through April 30th. So we will still have some legal expenses coming through directly related to the acquisition that occurred, May 5th? And after that, once we have that committee formed and we have a little more feel for how that additional $6 million is going to be spent, we'll break out this additional access and remediation costs a little bit and be able to track it in more detail. But at this time, we really don't have a feel for what the committee might put in place for that phase one.
Jen, why does the debt issuance costs, why does it say for future use? Is that 109 only available for future debt issuance costs, or is that the same as the like 12,399 is just available for other stuff?
It could be used for other things. We didn't have to use it this time because we had a premium that we could use. But it's just the variance is there if we need it. We had planned 125 for debt issuance. We've only used 15 so far.
But we do need to refinance the bands.
Right. There will be additional
Okay.
debt issuance activity on this.
Where did we issue the 40.95 or with the premium? Like what duration, what rate?
30 years.
Had a 19.8 year average life because we didn't bond any serial bonds in the first 2 years. And then the other half of it was issued basically as a 1 year piece of paper, right?
Right, but the rate on the bonds, what was it,
3.7,
Was it, yeah, 3.7?
and then the bands, I think, were 2.7.
Yeah, roughly. Thanks. And then the last couple pages are ARPA. So to date, we have now expended a total of $824,000. We've spent enough in the current year that it will have to be audited. It'll fall into some grant auditing requirements, so that'll be interesting. But as you can see, some projects like the senior tablet loan library on page 10, these are the types of things where they're done. We have a small amount sitting there. We need to be able to close them out. That'll be part of what the committee's doing. And then there's the bigger projects that need to be discussed if we reallocate funds. But that's all I have on the financial report.
You know, to Dan's comment earlier on the grant fund here, do we need to have a column that shows sort of encumbered, where it's been, you know, effectively agreed to be spent, we've ordered something and just haven't?
We can add that. I discussed this a couple weeks ago at our department head meeting. So when I report to Treasury in April of each year, I have to tell them how much we have spent, how much we have obligated. And I've asked the departments to go through, and even though our PO policy may not require them to put in POs for professional services or that sort of thing, I've asked them to look at all the contracts that they have and put in POs for everything they have on order, every contract that they have, so that we can get a good sense of how much of this is obligated. Because one potential problem is that Congress has tried to claw back on obligated funds, and the legislation that passed worded it in a way that because Treasury has already distributed the funds, those were considered obligated. But Government Finance Officers Association liaisons on the Hill are saying that language may get a little bit more sophisticated, because what they're really after is clawing back from cities and towns who have not yet spent the funds. So that's why I want the departments to put in POs for everything, so we really have that concrete number of what is technically obligated. I don't know when or if that will happen, but that is what some in Congress are trying to achieve.
Good idea, Jim. Smart.
Yeah, we need to be able to demonstrate that
That's out there.
they're obligated, that we have contracts on them, so. But next time I can add a column that shows what we have encumbered on each of these projects.
Jim, what's the current thinking on the difference between the bond authorization of 103 and what is currently on paper here? 91.
Well, I'd say that the two big things that are outstanding are just some remaining things that Monica and I'm working with her on are being settled. So I think those things should be hopefully figured out relatively shortly here. And then the other piece is, I think once the ARPA, the Great Island Committee is formed, you know, Monica's characterization of what the monies that would be spent from the larger bond proceeds, or what would sort of get people safely onto the island, but nothing, you know, sort of new related to activities or so forth like that. So I think, you know, once this committee gets together, they decide what needs to be done with roads, parking, signage, and security, that kind of basic stuff. I think that'll determine how much of that 6.4 gets used.
Okay, and then the remaining 12?
And then once that part is done, the remaining, we would just rescind that bond authorization, and then any part of the 6 million, 6.5 million that we bonded would go to another bonded project?
Well,
Right.
that 6.5 million is in notes, so it could just not be, say we didn't use any of
Yeah.
it, we just wouldn't reissue that part of the note or permanently finance that part of the note. So if we spend less, we'll issue
Got it.
permanently finance less.
We could buy back those bonds since they're trading below par, so.
Okay.
So approval of minutes, we have one set of minutes from our regular meeting on May 16th, 2023. Any comments?
No.
Okay, I'll accept the motion to approve the minutes of May 16th. Rob moves. Dan seconds. All those in favor?
I think I can vote.
Unanimous. Special assignments and committee reports. We'll start on this side. Rob, anything on your side?
Nothing on audit. And IT, just, as I've said, has kind of run its course and disbanded.
Okay. John, anything on the,
Yes, we've had 2 meetings with the union thus far. Keith presented our proposals, and the union came back with their proposals, and we're now each thinking about each other's proposals, and we have another meeting scheduled in a week or 2.
great.
But I think that it's been a very, very good process so far. Everybody seems to be working on the side of arriving at a good conclusion.
And this is Public Works, right?
Public Works, exactly.
Okay. Thanks. David?
We are out to bid for all 3 schools for Henley Homes and Royal currently. So bids are due back for Henley and Royal on 6/29, and bids are due back for Homes on 7/6. So the plans that went out to bid had been revised from the last appropriation that we approved as a group. And there were some things in there. There were ongoing design refinements. There were some scope adjustments for security and technology. There were some changes that ARB and P&Z had requested. And there were some unforeseen changes that, like, for example, I'm pretty sure it was Henley, there was what was deemed to be unsuitable soil. That doesn't mean it's an environmental issue. It means that the soil was unsuitable to be load-bearing for the type of building that they were going to put on it. So they're going to some unexpected remediation there. So the costs are likely to increase from the new estimates are different than what were used for the last appropriation that we did. If the bids come in exactly on the estimates that were done, we should be fine on Royal, but probably would end up having to come back for some additional appropriation for Henley and Homes. Our plan would be to wait until we have hard bids and final decisions on any add alternates to the projects, so that we would have actual numbers before making any supplemental requests. There are a list of add alternates for each school for potential, and we're kind of waiting to see where the bids come back before we entertain any of those items. As for scheduling, having to do the extra set of plans did push us back a little bit for the timing for the start. It looks like groundbreaking is going to be the middle of August. The plan there is to secure all the properties, put up all the fencing, arrange for the traffic flow and student flow and those types of things. During the school year, they would do all the new construction stuff, so they would be outside of the existing buildings predominantly. There might be a smidge of interior work done where they need to take down some ceiling tiles and things like that, because they're going to have some off-hour work done on the ventilation system. And the plan is that they're planning, they say that they can make up the time to have us at our original end date for the project by working 6 days a week for some portion of the project. So that's the plan, is to get it all closed on time. So we won't be. You should expect that we'll probably be back for some more money. We don't have a number for you now, because we want to wait until we have the actual bids, and that will likely be. If all goes to plan end of July, beginning of August, I hope to have some numbers for you.
And do you think when you have those numbers and you come back, do you think that like certain contingencies, like the bid contingency or so forth, like you might use some of those contingencies? And I've not all of them, but.
In order to sign the contracts with the subs, yes, right? Because we have to have an appropriated dollar amount in order to execute the contracts. There is an option where we could phase the signing of the contracts. That's not the preferred option. Effectively, mechanically, the way that it would work is we would use the contingency to allow us to sign the contract and then come back to get a supplemental appropriation to replace the contingency. When we go in, there are effectively 4 contingency buckets in the bid. 2 of them will be gone by the time we sign bids, which are the design contingency and the escalation clause. Escalation is set basically to cover inflation up into the time of you signing a bid, right? The two contingencies that would remain would be the construction manager's contingency and the owner's contingency. Those items would be left to incorporate any unforeseen things that come out during the actual work itself. But we are hopeful that by having a final set of construction drawings that went out to bid, we will limit the number of change orders that come in, because when you start getting change orders, you just open up for extra money sneaking in here and there and that kind of stuff. So we're trying to stay away from that.
Okay. I'll be short. I think on my side, I would just point out, I stretch all around an article, just maybe a little bit on audit here on, the importance of, I think we do a great job here of kind of tracking all the projects and expenditures and purchase orders and so forth that are going on, including we now need to audit sort of the ARPA fund. And I think having this level of detail, like down to the penny and so forth, I think will save us, and the great staff here will save us a lot of some of the problems that our neighbors are going through. So I think kudos again, Jen, to you and your team, and kind of tracking everything. So, and then on the, in terms of the summer agenda, a couple of the items that we had talked about was one, exploring sort of what if and what is possible as relates to sort of healthcare, whether we should be looking at self-insurance, and the other one was as we have successfully made changes to certain unions here on the town side, looking at making some of those same changes to the retirement benefits of those on the school side. I've reached out, going to try to set up a meeting with the Board of Ed, tentatively planned for early July. I asked Dan to join me, and probably ask another one of you to join me, depending on what's going to be covered at those meetings. I know, Rob, you have good background in some insurance,
Yep.
So sort of TBD, but we're trying to line up those meetings and obviously report back to you on whatever we hear there. Did Dan?
Yeah, Ox Ridge, we're actually just outside 2 months from completion. The kids go back to school late August, and we're in mid-June. So we had a meeting on site last week in one of the meeting rooms, and the project is in great shape. We have a revised all-in cost estimate of 56.6, including $50 million approximately in construction costs and $6 million approximately in soft costs. The authorization was for $63 million. So, and that 56 does not include the 4.1 million budgeted state grant, 3 of which we've received. So, anyway, we're all gung-ho to get this across the finish line, but there's no reason to think it won't happen.
Cool. Thank you.
Nice job.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds good.
Well, no victory laps yet.
Nope.
Well, thank you, appreciate that, but
I will say that I think the key to some of these successful projects are also the building committees. And I know on HHR, the Board of Selectmen voted last night to kind of bring 2 more residents on.
Yep.
to replace a couple that have either had stepped down or had left.
Yeah.
So, you know, kind of kudos to all those that served and put in the countless hours. So,
Thank you.
Taylor, anything on your side, or? Okay. Oh, no chairman's report. Any new business? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Dave moves. Rob seconds. All those in favor? Unanimous.